When we hear the word Mi'rāj, most of us immediately think of a moment fixed in sacred history. A night unlike any other. The Prophet Muhammad ascending through the heavens, meeting prophets, witnessing signs beyond human imagination, reaching a closeness to Allah where even Jibril could not continue. This event stands alone, unique, physical, spiritual, and inseparable from prophethood. No one repeats it. No one rivals it. But Sufis have long asked a quieter question. If Mi'rāj was not only a journey through the heavens, but also a revelation about the nature of reality itself, then what does it tell us about the human soul? Ibn Arabi approached Mi'rāj with this inward lens, not to imitate the Prophet and never to compare himself, but to understand what ascension truly means when stripped of distance, speed, and location. For him, Mi'rāj was not primarily about moving upward through space. It was about the lifting of veils, one by one, inside human awareness. Because if Allah is not contained by direction, then closeness to Allah cannot be measured in miles or heavens. It must be measured in perception. Think about your own life for a moment. There are times when nothing outward changes, yet everything inward does. A loss that rearranges your priorities, a silence that forces honesty, a moment when the world feels thinner as if something unseen is pressing closer. No light from the sky, no voice, just a sudden clarity or a sudden discomfort that won't let you return to who you were before. Could that be a kind of inner ascent? Ibn Arabi believed that long before the soul rises it is called, not dramatically, not loudly, but persistently. And most people mistake that call for anxiety, restlessness, or dissatisfaction. They think something is wrong with their life, when in reality something deeper is asking to be seen. In Sufi thought, Mi'rāj is not an escape from the world. It is a deeper entrance into it, a movement from surface meaning to inner truth, from seeing things as isolated events to recognizing them as signs, ayat, each pointing beyond itself. This is why Ibn Arabi never spoke of ascension as fantasy or imagination. He spoke of it as unveiling. The world does not disappear during Mi'rāj. It becomes transparent. A job loss stops being just misfortune. A delay stops being just frustration. A hardship stops being just pain. They begin to reveal patterns, wisdom, timing. The Quran itself hints at this layered reality when it says that signs exist both on the horizons and within yourselves, not above you only, not after death only, but here, now, quietly unfolding. Ibn Arabi understood Mi'rāj as the soul's capacity to move from seeing creation as solid and separate to seeing it as meaningful and interconnected. From reacting to events to reading them. From asking, why is this happening to me? To asking, what is being shown to me? And this shift does not require visions or miracles. It requires readiness. Because ascension does not begin with light. It begins with disturbance, with a sense that the explanations you once relied on no longer satisfy, with the feeling that your prayers are not unanswered, but unanswered in the way you expected. So before Ibn Arabi ever spoke of inner heavens, he spoke of something more fundamental, attention, what you notice, what you ignore, what you rush past in your own life. If Mi'rāj is real, then it cannot belong only to history. It must leave a trace in the present. And the first question it asks you is not how high you can rise, but whether you are willing to look beneath what you already think you understand. Because once that question is asked sincerely, the journey has already begun. Long before Ibn Arabi ever described an ascent, he described a life shaped quietly, patiently, and without spectacle. When people later read his accounts of inner unveiling, many imagined sudden illumination, as if insight descends without warning. But Ibn Arabi was clear about something most people overlook: nothing meaningful opens without preparation. He was not searching for experiences, he was shaping his character. For years, Ibn Arabi lived within discipline that looked ordinary from the outside: regular prayer, fasting beyond obligation, long nights awake while the world slept, periods of silence where speech felt unnecessary, moments of seclusion not to escape people, but to hear what remained when distraction faded. He trained himself to notice what most of us rush past: intention, reaction, impulse, desire. In Sufi tradition, this kind of preparation is called tadhib, refinement, not of the intellect but of the self, because knowledge without refinement only strengthens ego, and ascension without humility becomes illusion. This is why Ibn Arabi insisted that what later unfolded was not chosen by him. He did not plan a spiritual ascent the way one plans a journey. He did not set out seeking visions or ranks. He wrote that when the moment arrived, it felt as though something pulled him inward, unexpected, unavoidable, and beyond his control. That detail matters, because in real life, the moments that change us most often arrive the same way. You don't schedule the day your certainty collapses. You don't prepare emotionally for the conversation that exposes a hidden truth. You don't expect the loss that rearranges your values overnight. And yet, when those moments arrive, you later realize something quietly unsettling. They came when you were ready, even if you didn't feel prepared. Readiness is not comfort. Readiness is alignment. Ibn Arabi understood this. He knew that the soul ascends only when it can withstand honesty. This is why discipline mattered so deeply to him, not as punishment, but as training. Training to remain present when fear arises. Training to stay awake when clarity replaces habit. Training to surrender control when the familiar dissolves. Before his ascent, Ibn Arabi describes performing simple acts: ablution, prayer, stillness. Nothing dramatic, no declarations, no audience. Just a body placed correctly, a heart turned deliberately, and a willingness to wait without demanding outcome. This is where modern life struggles. We live in an age of instant answers and constant stimulation. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels unproductive. But Sufi wisdom insists that what is most real speaks softly, and if you cannot remain quiet long enough, you will never hear it. Have you noticed how the most important realizations in your life didn't arrive while you were busy explaining yourself, but when you were finally listening? Ibn Arabi believed that spiritual openings are not rewards for effort. They are responsibilities given to those who have learned restraint. Because once a veil lifts, you cannot unsee what you've seen. And without grounding, that knowledge can disorient rather than guide. This is why ascension is never accidental. It emerges from a long relationship with patience, from choosing presence over performance, from learning to sit with unanswered questions without forcing conclusions. And perhaps this is why so many people feel restless today, not because something is missing, but because something is approaching. Not because life is meaningless, but because surface meaning no longer satisfies. Ibn Arabi's preparation teaches us a difficult truth. If the soul is not trained, clarity will feel like chaos. But if the soul has learned humility, then even disruption becomes guidance. The ascent, he wrote, does not begin when the heavens open. It begins when you stop resisting what is already asking to change within you. And once that resistance softens, the first veil does not lift gently. It confronts you. When Ibn Arabi described the beginning of his inner ascension, he did not speak first of light, clarity, or peace. He spoke of darkness. Not the darkness of night and not the darkness of ignorance, but a more unsettling kind, the darkness that appears when all distractions fall away, when the soul is no longer shielded by routine, identity, or explanation, when nothing remains to hide behind. He called this the first veil. In Sufi language, this veil is the nafs, the self as it truly is, stripped of performance, not the version shown to others, not even the version we tell ourselves, but the raw inner state that holds fear, desire, resentment, pride, and longing all at once. Ibn Arabi wrote that as this veil appeared, everything felt constricted, awareness narrowed, familiar comfort disappeared. It was as if his inner world had gone silent and then unbearably loud. Thoughts rose without invitation. Memories surfaced without warning. Every human fear he had ever learned to suppress came forward at once. This is where many seekers turn back. Not because the path is false, but because the mirror is too honest. We see this same moment in ordinary life, though we rarely name it. It arrives when silence becomes uncomfortable, when success no longer distracts from dissatisfaction, when a person finally admits that what they chase does not quiet what they feel. In these moments, the ego tightens. It looks for escape, noise, justification, anything to avoid being seen clearly. Ibn Arabi did not describe the nafs as evil. This is an important distinction. In Sufi wisdom, the ego is not an enemy to be destroyed. It is a necessary vessel, one that must be illuminated, not annihilated. The danger lies not in having a nafs, but in allowing it to rule unseen. In that inner darkness, Ibn Arabi realized something essential. The nafs resists ascent because ascent dissolves its control. The ego survives by narrating, by labeling, by claiming ownership of experience. When those narratives weaken, fear rushes in to fill the gap. So he did not fight the darkness. He remembered. Not with words alone, but with attention, with presence, with a turning of the whole self toward what is greater than the self. Remembrance in this sense was not repetition, it was reorientation. Each moment of awareness softened the grip of fear. Each return to meaning pierced the darkness just enough for something else to emerge. And slowly something did. The darkness did not disappear. It revealed depth. What first felt like emptiness began to show structure. What felt threatening began to show purpose. Like eyes adjusting to night, awareness learned to see what was always there. Ibn Arabi understood then why this stage stops so many people. Facing the nafs requires relinquishing the stories we tell to protect ourselves. It asks for honesty without judgment, presence without control, and that feels more dangerous than any external trial. Have you ever noticed how confronting yourself can feel harder than confronting the world? This first veil teaches a quiet truth. Ascension does not begin by becoming something new. It begins by seeing what is already there without turning away. Until the nafs is acknowledged, every spiritual idea remains theoretical. Every prayer remains distant. Every sign remains misunderstood. Only when the ego is seen clearly does it loosen its grip. And only then does the ascent move forward, not away from the self but through it. Because the first veil is not meant to stop you. It is meant to prepare you for what lies beyond, where meaning begins to replace fear and perception starts to widen. And once that widening begins, the world no longer appears the same. Once the first veil loosened, Ibn Arabi did not feel as though he had traveled upward. He felt as though the world itself had changed how it revealed itself. What had once appeared solid now felt layered. What had once felt separate now appeared connected by an unseen order. This is how he described entering the inner heavens, not as places reached by movement, but as states uncovered by perception. In the first of these inner realms, the world did not disappear. It became legible. Ibn Arabi wrote that creation appeared like a text, not written in ink but in meaning. Mountains no longer stood as silent matter. They spoke of stability and endurance. Rivers no longer flowed aimlessly. They carried the language of mercy and provision. Even cities, with all their noise and contradiction, appeared as living expressions of human intention, fear, and hope. Nothing was random. And this realization alone was enough to undo the way he had once seen life. Think about how often we move through our days without truly seeing what surrounds us. We notice outcomes, not patterns. We feel emotions but rarely ask what shaped them. Yet when awareness shifts, ordinary events begin to speak. Delays hint at protection. Loss hints at redirection. Repetition hints at a lesson unlearned. Ibn Arabi understood this realm as the level where most people live their entire lives, believing, worshipping, striving, yet never looking beyond appearances. They see beauty but not its source. They experience blessings but do not trace them back to wisdom. Their faith is sincere, but their perception remains bound to form. And then he noticed something unexpected. He saw that suffering carried weight here, not as punishment but as transformation. Those who endured hardship with patience did not appear diminished. They appeared luminous. Illness borne with dignity. Loss met with trust. Betrayal endured without bitterness. Each had refined the soul in ways comfort never could. This is difficult to accept in theory. It becomes clearer in life. How often have the moments that reshaped you been the ones you would never have chosen? Ibn Arabi saw that hardship, when met with awareness, creates depth. It teaches restraint. It teaches humility. It teaches attention. Without it, the soul remains shallow, easily satisfied by surfaces. As awareness expanded further, he entered a realm where meaning existed before language. This was not a place of words, but of understanding itself. Ideas were not formed, they were known. Knowledge did not arrive through effort. It unfolded naturally, as if remembered rather than learned. He realized that insight does not originate in the mind, it descends into it. This explains something deeply human: why clarity often arrives unexpectedly, why solutions appear when we stop forcing them, why wisdom feels received, not manufactured. When a person has a sudden realization in prayer, in grief, or even in silence, it is not imagination at work, it is access. And yet, most people dismiss these moments because they cannot explain them. Ibn Arabi did not dismiss them. He saw them as signs of a deeper structure, one in which all knowledge already exists, waiting for readiness rather than intelligence. As the ascent continued, awareness softened further and something even more destabilizing appeared: love. Not emotion, not attachment, but love as the force behind existence itself. Here, Ibn Arabi realized that creation did not emerge from command alone, but from desire to be known. Love was not something Allah possesses. Love was the reason anything exists at all. Every attraction, every bond, every longing was a reflection, sometimes clear, sometimes distorted, of this fundamental pull. This explained why love overwhelms reason, why it dissolves boundaries, why it humbles the strongest and softens the hardest. It was not weakness, it was origin. And suddenly, even ordinary love made sense. A mother holding her child. A person sacrificing comfort for someone they care about. A quiet loyalty that persists without recognition. These were not small acts, they were echoes of something vast. But Ibn Arabi also saw how love becomes misdirected. When attention attaches to status, control, or possession, the energy of love remains, but its object narrows. This is why desire can elevate or imprison. The same force moves through both. Have you ever wondered why fulfillment fades when love is misplaced, even if you get what you wanted? As perception widened further, the world revealed itself not as chaotic but as precisely balanced. Actions carried consequences not imposed from outside but woven into reality itself. Kindness created expansion. Harm created contraction. Nothing was lost. Nothing escaped its echo. This was not judgment, it was structure. Ibn Arabi saw that people do not suffer because they are punished. They suffer because imbalance seeks correction. And when imbalance is resisted, pain persists. This understanding reframed accountability. It removed the illusion of injustice while preserving moral responsibility. Nothing was excused. Everything was understood. And through all of this, the ascent did not feel distant from life. It felt closer. Because the more Ibn Arabi saw, the more he recognized the same truths quietly unfolding in everyday experience, in relationships, in hardship, in moments of unexpected clarity. The inner heavens were not above him. They were revealing what had always been present, waiting beneath habit, distraction, and assumption. And yet, even this expansion had a boundary, a place where understanding itself could go no further. And toward that limit, the ascent continued. As Ibn Arabi's awareness continued to widen, something unexpected occurred. The expansion did not lead to greater certainty in the way the intellect understands certainty. Instead, it led to a boundary, a quiet, unmistakable limit beyond which familiar forms of knowing could no longer proceed. This was not a wall. It was not a barrier imposed from outside. It was a recognition. Up to this point, meaning had unfolded steadily. Patterns revealed themselves. Wisdom connected itself to lived experience. Love, justice, and mercy began to make sense as underlying structures of existence. But now, Ibn Arabi reached a point where even meaning itself began to dissolve. Here, explanation weakened. He described this as the edge of what can be known while still remaining a distinct self. Beyond it, there was no confusion, but there was no language either. Thought did not fail because it was wrong. It failed because it was no longer needed. This is difficult to accept for the modern mind. We are trained to believe that more understanding always brings more control, that if we know enough, analyze enough, explain enough, uncertainty will disappear. But Ibn Arabi saw the opposite. True knowledge eventually leads to humility, not mastery. There are moments in life that mirror this threshold. Standing beside someone you love as they pass away. Holding grief that has no solution. Feeling awe so complete that questions fall silent. In those moments, you are not ignorant. You are simply present before something larger than interpretation. Ibn Arabi understood that angels, too, stop at this boundary, not because they are weak, but because their nature is defined. Each angel embodies a particular function, a particular attribute. Their knowledge is precise, but it is partial. They know what they are created to know. Human consciousness, however, is different. Not superior, but expansive. Humans carry contradiction, mercy and severity, love and restraint, weakness and resolve. This complexity allows us to approach the limit not through purity of function, but through surrender of certainty. The human soul can move closer to this boundary because it can let go of the need to define itself. And this letting go is the final test. At this stage, Ibn Arabi realized that the greatest obstacle to closeness is not sin or ignorance, but attachment to explanation, the need to name, to categorize, to conclude. As long as the self insists on standing apart and understanding, it remains separate. This is why the Quran repeatedly emphasizes humility of knowing, why prophets speak carefully, why the most truthful statements about Allah are often the shortest. Silence here is not absence, it is accuracy. Have you noticed how some experiences lose their truth the moment you try to explain them? Ibn Arabi did not attempt to cross this boundary by force. There was no striving left, no technique, no method, only availability, only willingness to let awareness rest without grasping. This is where many misunderstand Sufism. They imagine it as pursuit of extraordinary states. In reality, it is the slow removal of resistance to what already is. At the limit of knowledge, nothing new is added. Something essential is removed. The assumption of separation. The idea that there is a knower here and something known there. As this assumption softened, Ibn Arabi sensed that what lay ahead could not be approached as an individual moving toward an object. Movement itself lost meaning. Distance collapsed. Direction dissolved. What remained was not darkness or light, but readiness. And from that readiness, something irreversible unfolded. not an experience to describe, but a return that would change how everything else would later be seen. And with that, the ascent passed beyond understanding and entered dissolution. Ibn Arabi wrote that what followed could not be explained in the way earlier stages had been, not because it was mysterious, but because there was no longer a clear someone to describe what was happening. The movement that had once felt like ascent no longer felt like movement at all. There was no crossing, no arrival, only the quiet disappearance of separation. He did not describe meeting Allah because there was no longer a self left to meet anything. The language of encounter depends on distance, and distance had dissolved. What remained was not vision, not sound, not emotion, but presence without boundary. He later tried to express this state through paradox. He wrote of seeing without eyes, knowing without thought, existing without identity, not as poetry meant to impress, but as an honest attempt to remain truthful where clarity itself no longer took familiar form. This was not annihilation in the sense of destruction. Nothing violent occurred. What dissolved was the illusion of independence, the assumption that I exist apart from what is. In everyday life, we catch brief glimpses of this, though we rarely name them. Moments when self-consciousness fades, when absorption replaces anxiety, when action flows without inner commentary, a person lost in prayer, a caregiver forgetting themselves in service, an artist so immersed that time disappears. These moments do not feel dramatic, they feel right. Ibn Arabi understood that what mystics call a macron letter 2be, dissolution, is not escape from responsibility. It is the removal of the barrier that prevents sincerity. When the self no longer claims ownership, action becomes cleaner, intention becomes simpler. And then, without explanation, the return occurred. He found himself once again aware of his body, dawn light filtering into the room, familiar surroundings unchanged. The world had not shifted. The sky did not look different. People continued their lives unaware that anything extraordinary had happened. But something essential had altered. The return was not a fall from closeness. It was an integration. Ibn Arabi did not come back with authority or superiority. He came back with caution. Because once the illusion of separation is seen through, even partially, ordinary life carries a different weight. Speech becomes careful, judgment softens, certainty loosens. He understood that what he had witnessed could not be claimed as possession. It could only be lived as responsibility. This is why he spent the rest of his life writing, not to impress, but to translate what cannot fully be translated, so that others might recognize hints of it in their own lives. And this is where many misunderstand spiritual experiences. They expect transformation to announce itself loudly. They imagine visible change, constant serenity, unmistakable power. But real change is quieter. It shows itself in restraint, in patience, in the ability to hold ambiguity without fear. After the return, Ibn Arabi did not withdraw from the world. He remained engaged. He taught. He traveled. He debated. He disagreed when necessary, but beneath it all, the urgency to defend an identity had softened. Because when you no longer experience yourself as separate, defending the self loses importance. This is the quiet mark of genuine inner change. Not constant bliss, not dramatic insight, but an ease with not knowing. And perhaps this is the most difficult lesson of the ascent, that what matters most is not what you experience in moments of unveiling, but how you live once those moments pass. Because ascension, in its truest sense, is not measured by how far you go. It is measured by how gently you return, and how faithfully you carry what cannot be spoken into a life that must still be lived among others. And with that return, one question remains. What does this journey reveal, not about Ibn Arabi, but about you? At this point in the journey, it becomes clear that Ibn Arabi was never mapping the heavens for their own sake. He was mapping you. Not your personality, not your beliefs, but the deeper structure of how a human being comes to see reality. His Mi'rāj was not meant to impress later readers or establish spiritual rank. It was meant to reveal something unsettling and intimate, that the distance we imagine between ourselves and meaning is largely self-created. Because if ascension is the lifting of veils, then the real question is not whether such veils exist, but whether you notice them in your own life. Most people wait for signs that feel extraordinary, a sudden answer, a dramatic shift, a moment that clearly announces itself as spiritual. But Ibn Arabi's journey suggests the opposite, that signs are already woven into ordinary experience, quietly repeating themselves until they are recognized. A recurring struggle that doesn't resolve. A pattern in relationships that keeps resurfacing. A restlessness that success fails to silence. These are not punishments, they are invitations. In Sufi wisdom, the soul is constantly being addressed, not through voices but through circumstances, not through spectacle but through repetition. What you keep encountering is often what you have not yet understood. This is why Ibn Arabi emphasized attention over effort. You do not ascend by escaping your life. You ascend by reading it more honestly, by noticing what humbles you, what provokes you, what slows you down against your will. Have you ever wondered why certain lessons arrive gently for some and forcefully for others? It is not favoritism, it is responsiveness. The soul that listens needs less pressure. The soul that resists requires louder signs. Ibn Arabi's Mi'rāj also reframes hardship in a way that challenges comfort-driven spirituality. Difficulty in this view is not the opposite of closeness. It is often its condition, because ease can dull perception while struggle sharpens it. Patience stretches awareness. Loss exposes attachment. Waiting trains trust. This does not make pain desirable, it makes it meaningful. And meaning changes how pain is carried. Another quiet truth emerges here. Not everyone is meant to travel the same path. Ascension does not look identical in every life. Some are refined through family responsibility, others through illness, others through obscurity or service or long periods where nothing seems to happen at all. Stillness, too, is movement if it is conscious. Ibn Arabi never taught people to chase inner experiences. He taught them to refine their seeing, because once perception changes, life itself becomes the teacher. Every encounter becomes instruction. Every delay becomes timing. Every ending becomes transition rather than collapse. And perhaps the most humbling realization of all is this: you do not need to reach what you are seeking. You need to stop overlooking it. The heavens Ibn Arabi described were not above him. They were disclosed within him as his assumptions fell away, as certainty loosened, as attention deepened. This means the question his Mi'rāj leaves you with is not mystical or abstract. It is practical. What in your life keeps asking for patience? What keeps returning because it has not yet been understood? What would change if you treated your circumstances not as interruptions, but as signs? Because ascension does not always feel like rising. Sometimes it feels like being slowed down enough to finally see. And if you are willing to see, then perhaps the journey Ibn Arabi described is not distant at all. Perhaps it is already unfolding, quietly, persistently, within the life you are living right now. So perhaps the real question is not what Ibn Arabi saw during his Mi'rāj, but what you are being shown in your own life, right now, in ways so ordinary they are easy to dismiss. Have you ever noticed a moment, a delay, or a struggle that later revealed a deeper meaning? If this reflection resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Voice of Sufism, and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss future stories of wisdom and inner signs. I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments a small experience in your life that once felt like coincidence, but later felt like guidance. Your reflection may help someone else see more clearly. And if you'd like to continue this journey, explore the related videos appearing on your screen now. Until next time, stay attentive. Sometimes the greatest signs arrive quietly,